Gunfire snaps through the darkness as Mud grips unseen boots moving fast and silent through enemy territory. A radio crackles once, twice then dissolves into static. The air smells of damp earth, burning oil, and fear as artillery rumbles somewhere beyond the trees. A lone figure presses herself against a crumbling stone wall, counting approaching footsteps while a flare suddenly ignites the sky, briefly exposing her shadow across the ruins. In that split second, a German patrol commander radios an unexpected report. An unidentified woman moving alone, deep behind the lines. But no Allied unit had deployed her, no intelligence file listed her name, and no mission logs acknowledged her existence. By morning, every trace of her would be gone, because moments after that transmission, something impossible happened. Asterisk, it is late 1943 in occupied Europe. A moment when the war hangs on fragile momentum, and a single mistake could cost thousands of lives. The Allies are preparing a massive, secret operation, one so sensitive that even whispers of compromise could lead to catastrophe. Resistance networks operate in shadows, where one arrest can erase an entire city's underground movement overnight. Women couriers and operatives move invisibly through this chaos, trained to blend in, survive alone, and vanish if necessary, but this mission breaks every rule. She was sent without backup, without an extraction plan, and without official documentation, tasked with confirming whether a critical Allied strategy had already been exposed to the enemy. If she failed, divisions of soldiers could march directly into a trap, and while commanders believed the danger lay ahead, none of them realized the real threat was already watching her move. Asterisk at precisely 2:17 in the morning. Far from the front lines, a faint signal cuts through the steady hum of an Allied listening post. Operators lean closer as a German transmission pushes through the static short. Urgent and improperly encrypted, as if sent in haste. When the code is finally broken, the room goes quiet. The message does not reference troop movements or supply lines, but something far more unsettling. An unidentified female operative sighted deep inside restricted territory, moving with intention, avoiding patrols before they even appear. At first, analysts assume a mistranslation, but then a second transmission arrives. Confirming the sighting and adding a line that sends a chill through the room, she appears to possess knowledge of routes, timings, and safe zones that should only exist on classified Allied maps. This was never supposed to happen. No mission had been authorized in that sector, no agent briefed, no contingency prepared. As officers scramble through files, radio logs, and deployment lists, her existence remains unaccounted for, as if she had stepped into the war without permission. Meanwhile, on the ground, she pauses at the edge of a narrow street just as a German flare bursts overhead, illuminating rooftops, windows, and the unmistakable tightening of a net closing around her position. She realizes in that instant that the enemy is not reacting randomly. They are moving with precision, adjusting routes seconds before she arrives, anticipating choices she has not yet made. Somewhere, someone is guiding them. Somewhere, something has already gone wrong. And as the listening post intercepts one final line, "Do not let her reach the rendezvous," it becomes clear that the next 90 seconds will decide whether this mission is erased quietly, or whether its consequences will echo through the war itself. Asterisk. The first indication that the operation is unraveling does not come from gunfire or alarms, but from something far more disturbing: silence. The streets ahead of her, once expected to pulse with distant movement and civilian life even under occupation, are unnaturally still. No footsteps echo in the alleys. No doors creak open or shut. Even the distant hum of engines seems to have withdrawn, as if the city itself has chosen to watch rather than breathe. She slows instinctively, every sense sharpening, aware that this kind of quiet never exists by accident. It is the sound of preparation. Her boots touch stone carefully now, each step measured, each pause deliberate. Routes she memorized weeks earlier no longer feel reliable. Corners that should offer cover feel exposed. Windows appear darker than before, not because lights are out, but because someone may be standing just beyond the glass. She checks her watch once, then forces herself not to look again. Time awareness can become a liability when panic sets in. The radio pressed against her ribs emits a faint hiss, the kind that barely registers unless you're trained to hear it. She resists the urge to adjust it. Any transmission now, even a fraction of a second too long, could betray her position. Instead, she listens to the environment, piecing together information the way intelligence officers do from intercepted signals. A truck idles somewhere too long. Boots scrape stone, then stop abruptly. Orders are spoken softly in a language she understands, just well enough to recognize urgency. She realizes then that the patrols are no longer sweeping. They are positioning miles away, in a dim Allied command room. A map flickers under shifting light as officers argue in hushed but urgent voices. Grease pencil lines mark her projected route, but German unit markers keep appearing ahead of schedule, as if the enemy is reacting to decisions before they are made. One analyst insists it's coincidence. Another points out that coincidence does not repeat with this level of precision. A third quietly asks the question no one wants to answer. What if they know the destination? Back on the ground, she reaches what should have been her first confirmation point. A chalk mark, simple, meaningless to anyone else, was supposed to be waiting on the brick wall near the entrance. It isn't there. Instead, the wall has been scrubbed clean. That alone would be concerning. But what freezes her in place is what replaces it. A different mark, faint but deliberate, placed just high enough to be missed by an untrained eye. A resistance warning. Safe house compromised. She does not hesitate. Training overrides instinct. She pivots, disappears into a side passage, and alters her route without breaking stride. Somewhere behind her, a door opens. Voices murmur. A dog barks once, sharp and sudden. She ducks into a recessed doorway as a patrol passes close enough that she can smell leather and tobacco. One soldier laughs quietly, relaxed, as if confident the net has already closed. That confidence is the most terrifying thing of all. She understands now that this is no longer a search. It is containment. They are not trying to find her quickly. They are guiding her movement, shaping it, narrowing her options while waiting for something specific to happen. And she does not yet know what that something is. At headquarters, radio traffic spikes. Resistance cells go silent one by one. A scheduled signal fails to arrive, then another. Someone slams a fist on the table. Someone else orders calm. Files are pulled. Names checked. Still no record of her mission exists in the system. One officer finally says it out loud. If this goes wrong, officially, she was never there. The implication hangs heavy in the air, on the street. The first shot rings out not at her, but close enough to shatter the illusion of control. Glass breaks somewhere ahead. A shout follows, then another. She drops into a run, boots striking stone hard now, no longer hiding, 'cause speed has become the only remaining advantage. A truck roars to life behind her. Searchlights cut through the darkness, sweeping walls, doorways. She dives into a cellar just as bullets strike the street above, the sound deafening in the confined space. Dust rains down. Her breathing comes fast now, but steady. Fear is present, but contained. She has crossed a threshold. There is no retreat left to consider, and as she presses herself against the cold stone wall below ground, listening to boots pounding overhead, one realization becomes unavoidable. This chaos is not accidental, it is engineered, and she is at the center of it. Asterisk. She remains motionless in the cellar, long after the boots pass overhead, listening not just for sound, but for rhythm. Patrols move in patterns when they are searching. Tonight, there is no pattern-only placement. When the noise fades, it does not drift away. It relocates. The enemy is not circling blindly. They are sealing corridors, blocking exits, forcing choices. When she finally emerges, the city feels smaller, compressed, as if entire streets have been erased from possibility. She adjusts her coat and resumes moving, choosing routes that contradict instinct, cutting across exposed ground instead of hugging cover, because the obvious paths are now traps. Twice, she narrowly avoids interception, not because she hides better, but because she anticipates where the Germans believe she should be. Each near miss sharpens the same terrifying conclusion. They are operating from intelligence that mirrors her own. Asterisk at Allied headquarters. Tension breaks into open conflict. Orders contradict each other within minutes. One directive calls for immediate termination of the operation. Another insists she must reach the rendezvous at any cost. A senior officer finally halts the argument with a quiet statement that freezes the room. There was never an extraction window. Silence follows. Some officers realize, for the first time, that this mission was designed with failure already accounted for, not tactical failure, but personal loss. At Allied headquarters, tension breaks into open conflict. Orders contradict each other within minutes. One directive calls for immediate termination of the operation. Another insists she must reach the rendezvous at any cost. A senior officer finally halts the argument with a quiet statement that freezes the room. There was never an extraction window. Silence follows. Some officers realize, for the first time, that this mission was designed with failure already accounted for, not tactical failure, but personal loss. Asterisk back in the city, she reaches a secondary contact point meant only for emergencies. The signal is subtle, a window left ajar at a specific angle. Tonight it is wide open. That is all the confirmation she needs. She turns away before anyone inside can see her. Whoever was there has either been compromised or replaced. Trust is now a liability. Fatigue begins to creep in, not physical exhaustion, but cognitive strain. Every decision now carries weight beyond survival. She is no longer navigating a city. She is navigating intent, hers versus theirs. And slowly, an even darker realization surfaces. This operation has forced the enemy to reveal how they think, their speed, their priorities, their fear. The chaos is no longer random, it is informative. German radio traffic intensifies. It's no longer cautious, no longer coded as carefully. Orders are being rushed. Units are overlapping. One patrol nearly collides with another at an intersection she vacated seconds earlier. For the first time, the enemy's precision begins to fracture under its own momentum. They are reacting too fast now, committing resources openly. And that exposure is costing them something they cannot afford. She pauses in the shadow of a collapsed building and listens as to officers argue nearby. One insists she must be captured alive. The other counters that containment has failed and termination is now preferable. The words confirm what she suspected. Her value is not in what she carries, but in what she confirms simply by moving. Every response she triggers reveals intelligence pathways, command structure, and readiness the enemy never intended to show. At headquarters, analysts start noticing the same thing. German redeployments are no longer defensive, they are anticipatory. Routes are changing. Timetables are shifting. A pattern emerges, and when it does, it sends a chill through the room. Someone quietly redraws a major Allied operation on the map. Then another. Then another. What would have been catastrophic only hours earlier is now avoidable, but only if changes are made immediately. Without explanation, on the ground, the city erupts briefly into chaos as a false alarm triggers multiple units at once. Sirens wail. Searchlights swing wildly. In the confusion, she slips through a checkpoint not because she blends in, but because everyone is suddenly looking in the wrong direction. For a moment, the net loosens not by accident, but because it has been pulled too tight. She stops once more, hidden in plain sight, and finally allows herself to think beyond the next step. She understands now why her mission was undocumented, why no extraction was planned, why failure was never defined. She was sent not to survive, but to force movement, to provoke the enemy into revealing how deeply they already knew. The chaos was the objective. As dawn begins to bleed into the sky, she disappears from confirmed sightings entirely. German reports become confused, then contradictory. Some units insist she escaped the perimeter. Others believe she doubled back. A final report claims she was never there at all. The truth is simpler and more unsettling. She has completed the most dangerous phase of the mission. By the time comm begins to return to the city, the damage strategic, psychological, irreversible, has already been done. And as commanders on both sides assess the night's events, one fact becomes undeniable. The chaos was not the failure of the mission. It was the proof that it. By the time the city begins to stir toward morning, the operation has reached a point of no return. What was once a controlled test of enemy awareness has become a race against exposure, time, and trust. At Allied headquarters, the air is thick with urgency as radios chatter over one another. Analysts speak in clipped sentences, and maps are redrawn faster than ink can dry. The realization settles in quietly but heavily. The enemy is not merely reacting to Allied moves, they are anticipating them. Every delayed transmission, every premature patrol, every shifted checkpoint now points to a breach that runs deeper than anyone wants to admit. The question is no longer whether the plan has been compromised, but how much of it has already been absorbed, interpreted, and prepared against, on the ground. She feels the same truth closing in from a different direction. Her movements have narrowed to a handful of remaining options, each more dangerous than the last. The city, once a maze of possibilities, has become a funnel. She can sense it in the way patrols linger at intersections, in the way streets empty seconds before she arrives, in the way the enemy no longer seems surprised to find her nearby. She understands now that survival is no longer the measure of success. Completion is. And completion may require a choice she was never meant to make. She reaches a temporary Shaltora place not marked on any official map, known only to a handful of resistance members who have already gone silent. Inside, she finally allows herself to open the sealed directive hidden deep within her coat. The paper is thin, the writing precise, stripped of emotion. It confirms what she suspected during the chaos of the night. Her mission was never reconnaissance alone. It was confirmation. Confirmation of enemy readiness, of internal compromise, of whether Allied leadership itself had been observed too closely for too long. She was sent because her disappearance could be denied. Her success could be absorbed silently. Her failure would leave no trace. Outside, the sound of engines grows closer. Orders are being shouted now, no longer cautious, no longer coded. The enemy has decided to end this. She folds the directive carefully, not out of sentiment, but discipline. There is one final action outlined, a contingency that relies on speed, precision, and the understanding that there will be no response. When she steps back into the street, she does so knowing that every second from this point forward will echo far beyond her own fate. At headquarters, a senior officer finally authorizes changes that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. Entire units are rerouted, without explanation. Timelines are quietly pushed back. A major operation, one that history will later treat as inevitably is altered, in subtle but critical ways. The room does not celebrate. No one speaks. They all know that these changes are being made because of information that cannot be attributed, confirmed, or acknowledged. Somewhere, someone is paying for this knowledge in real time. She reaches the final transmission point just as the net tightens for the last time. Searchlights cut across walls and rooftops. Boots pound closer. There is no confusion now, no hesitation. She activates the transmitter and sends a single, compressed burst short enough to be nearly untraceable, dense enough to carry everything that matters: coordinates, confirmations, a warning that arrives only seconds before it would have been too late. At headquarters, the message is received, decoded, and understood instantly. Orders are issued without debate. The war's trajectory bends, slightly, invisibly, but decisively. Then the signal ends. No further transmissions follow. No confirmation. No request for extraction. The frequency goes dead, and with it, the last measurable trace of her existence. Reports from the field become contradictory almost immediately. Some German units claim she was cornered near the river. Others insist she vanished into the city. One file suggests she never reached the transmission point at all. None of them agree, and none of them provide proof. What remains is absence total, unresolved, and deeply unsettling. As daylight spreads across the city, the enemy's urgency dissolves into uncertainty. Patrols stand down. Checkpoints loosen. The precision that defined the night fractures under the weight of unanswered questions. At Allied headquarters, the room finally exhales, not in relief, but in recognition. The cost of what was gained has fully registered. A victory has been secured without ceremony, without attribution, without a name to attach to it, and somewhere between those two outcomes, between the silence on the radio and the quiet rewriting of plans history, changes course not with an explosion, not with a parade, but with a disappearance that no one is allowed to explain, asterisk, in the days that follow. The war continues as if nothing extraordinary has occurred. Newspapers report familiar headlines. Radio broadcasts speaking carefully chosen phrases about progress, resistance, and endurance. Yet beneath the surface of routine, something subtle has shifted. Orders move through Allied channels that do not match earlier plans. Timetables change without explanation. Entire units are reassigned with no public justification. To the soldiers executing these commands, it feels like ordinary wartime adjustment. To those who know how close catastrophe came, it feels like a quiet miracle purchased at an invisible cost. No official report mentions her mission. No commendation is drafted. No name is circulated for recognition. When clerks search for documentation, they find only gaps files that jump from one date to another. Memos that reference decisions without explaining their origin. It is as if a crucial chapter has been deliberately removed before anyone outside a very small circle could read it. Even within that circle, discussion is discouraged. Not forbidden, simply avoided. Everyone understands that some victories must remain unattributed to remain useful. Among the resistance, rumors spread slowly, carried in whispers rather than words. A woman was seen moving through the city before the crackdowns began. She spoke little. She asked precise questions. She listened more than she talked. One survivor later writes that she said goodbye without drama, without fear, as if she already knew there would be no reunion. Another recalls that she declined to give her real name, not out of secrecy, but because it no longer mattered. These accounts are never collected officially. They survive only in personal letters and diaries, many of which remain hidden or are destroyed long after the war ends. On the other side, German records tell a different, equally incomplete story. Reports conflict. Timelines don't align. Some officers insist they nearly captured a high-value operative. Others deny such an operation ever existed. One interrogation transcript, declassified decades later, contains a moment of rare honesty when an officer admits, "We reacted too strongly to something we did not fully understand." That admission, buried deep in the archive, hints at a truth neither side was eager to preserve in full. Years pass, the war ends. Historians begin their work, reconstructing events from fragments, comparing documents, interviewing survivors. Again and again, they encounter the same anomaly, a brief window in which Allied plans shift decisively. German responses spike unnaturally, and then silence. No trigger event is officially recorded. No agent is credited. The gap remains stubborn and unexplained. Some historians suggest coincidence. Others suspect classified intelligence that never made it into public records. A few quietly note that disappearances often leave the clearest fingerprints. Eventually, a small set of documents is declassified, heavily redacted, stripped of names, locations, and conclusions. In one memo, senior Allied commander writes of an unrecorded asset whose actions necessitated immediate strategic revision. A personal note expresses regret not for the outcome, but for the certainty that the individual involved understood the risk from the beginning. There is no follow-up, no closure. The trail ends where it always has. What makes her story unsettling is not simply that she vanished. War is full of disappearances. What lingers is the implication that her disappearance was not an accident of chaos, but a consequence of success. She confirmed what needed to be confirmed. She forced the enemy to reveal what they never meant to show. She provided clarity at a moment when uncertainty could have cost tens of thousands of lives. And once that clarity was obtained, Her existence became inconvenience, something that could complicate explanations, raise questions, or expose methods best left in shadow, so she remains unrecorded. No grave bears her name. No photograph survives with certainty. No official history gives her a place. Yet her absence is woven into the fabric of decisions that shaped the war's outcome. Every altered route, every delayed landing, every avoided disaster carries an echo of that night. And in that sense, she was never truly lost. She became something far more unsettling, a reminder that some of the most important acts in history are carried out by people, or never meant to be remembered. And somewhere, locked away in an archive that may never fully open, the truth of what she saw and why it mattered so much waits in silence, because the most dangerous thing she carried was never a weapon. It was the knowledge that changed everything.